Hi, everybody. Looks like it's 10:01, so we should start things. Everybody hear me okay? All right. My name is Mark Stricker. I work in the Office of Public Affairs and Communications. I'm the team leader for social media, assistant director for digital strategy. I've been at Yale since 2008. I started in ITS. I was the editor of the ITS Monday morning newsletter, and then I moved to finance and business operations communications, where I oversaw various communications channels there, including the Business Leaders Update, also known as Yale Blue, which was one of the first sites built in YaleSites back in the day. Now I'm at the Office of Public Affairs and Communications, where I oversee social media, and also I'm the editor of the Yale.edu homepage. So background in both web and social media, which is why I'm giving this talk, which I've for some reason titled Optimizing Your Website for Social Media Interoperability. I just wanted to fit as many syllables as I could into that. I've chosen this picture because I think it's just hilarious, and really has nothing, thankfully, to do with my presentation. But a few things. We'll have plenty of time for questions. I haven't timed my talk, but it shouldn't take the whole time. So if you have questions, save them until the end, and then we'll get to those then. So as you're probably aware, social media continues to be a large portion of internet activity, traffic, time, etc. I've always been partial to this sort of explanation of why people do what they do on social media by Sonia Song in an article about psychology of sharing on social media, where she says that social media sharing is charged with emotions, bounded by self-image management, and also by concerns over relationships with others. I think that sums up people's motivations pretty well and gives us sort of a base to work from when we're thinking about our own websites. But when you think about, what you or your friends or others are sharing and reading on social media, there does seem to be an emotional factor there, right? You either strongly agree with something, or you disagree with something, or you have some kind of visceral emotional reaction to it, and that's why you feel compelled to share it with other people in your network. But it's also bounded by self-image management, right? So you want to identify a certain way. Your social media content, therefore, reflects you as a person sometimes, which is why in a lot of people's Twitter bios, they claim that RTs are not an endorsement, or these are not, the opinions of my employer, these are my own. Self-image management seems to be a really important key component to that. And concerns over relationship with others, social media really drives us to extend what we're doing on our computer out to other people. So while search continues to be a huge driver of traffic on websites, especially websites like those of us have purview over, we're not sharing necessarily our search histories with folks, right? That's something that probably makes, some people cringe for whatever reason. But, social media is really about, connecting what you're doing on your computer with what other people are doing on their computer, building relationships with others. So again, content that you have an emotional connection with that somehow is wrapped up with how you identify yourself, but also how your awareness of your relationship with other people. So why do we care about this as the owners or operators or editors of a website? Social media drives website traffic, or to be more accurate, Facebook drives website traffic, and Twitter sometimes. And again, this is based on my own data from both the Yale News website that OPAC oversees and the Yale.edu website. And I'll show you some of the differences between those. In 2016, Facebook drove 15% of all the traffic to Yale News. That's actually down from the previous year, and I'll get into, in 2015, Facebook was actually the largest driver of traffic to Yale News by percentage. So it actually beat out search. It actually beat out the weekly, biweekly email that goes out. But in 2016, that number decreased a little bit. I don't think that was necessarily a trend, but had to do with the fact that in 2015 we had an amazingly popular article written about a student who won a poetry slam competition that really was just shared a phenomenal amount on Facebook. But in 2016, this last year, the email newsletter that goes out to all faculty, staff, students, and alumni who have not opted out accounted for 30% of our traffic. Which shows that, email newsletters, when you have a captive audience who, expects that email in their inbox and there's something in that email that interests them, that continues to be a large driver of our traffic overall. Organic search accounted for 24% overall, and social accounted for 20%, followed by direct and referral. Organic search just beat out social. Like I said, the year before, social beat out search. And the type of traffic that comes from search is very different than what comes from social. So if you looked at our actual individual articles, our most popular articles of the year, the source of traffic would be from social, right? Because it's about networks of people driving a lot of traffic to a very select number of popular articles, whereas organic search is all over the place. So that is built up by, individuals who are searching for something, finding it on our site and going to that article. But, it's a much longer list of articles with much fewer individual page hits. So that's something to think about, this difference between the traffic. It's not just enough to say, this percent versus this percent. You really need to pay attention to to dice up your analytics in various ways to really get a better look at how people are interacting with that content. And I'll get into that in a few minutes. Social traffic to Yale News, 75% came from Facebook. So that's why Facebook is a driver of traffic, whereas Twitter only accounted for 12%, other is 13%. And just to be clear, this is traffic from those networks as a whole, not just Yale's own Facebook or Yale's own Twitter. It's a much lower percentage than that. This is, overall. Sources of traffic to Yale.edu, on the other hand. So that was Yale News. So that's updated daily, lots of news articles, things that are content that's changing a lot. Yale.edu, traditionally called the blue site, but it's no longer blue, really that blue. It's more, white with blue. Is a small site, right? We don't have that many pages. Most of our pages link off to the admissions site or the ITS site, or it's your Yale. We don't have like this one overarching site. But the homepage and some of the other landing pages are what constitute this Yale.edu data. Organic search accounted for 54% of traffic in 2016. To the newly designed site. Direct traffic was 40%, referral traffic was 5%, and social traffic was 1%. So think about the difference between the information you find on Yale News and Yale.edu, right? Yale.edu, most people are there to get to information that probably lives on another site. They don't know that. They might not even think about it that way. But, they're there to get admissions information, or they're there to get the link to, their graduate school or their program or whatever else they're getting to. A lot of people still come in through the homepage. People that use It's Your Yale every day still get there through the main Yale.edu page a lot of times rather than using their bookmarks for whatever reason. But as you see, social traffic really accounts for very little traffic to that particular website. So it's important to know, what do people share on your site? You need to know, okay, is there content in my site that's already being shared on social media? The best way to do that is to open up Google Analytics. And this will probably only be accurate for today because Google keeps changing this whole layout. but it's accurate for today. Acquisition, social network referrals. So you can see how much traffic is coming in from individual networks. So this is Yale News again, Facebook traffic, Twitter, Reddit still contributing some traffic, but is down from like 4 years ago when it was actually the largest source of quote unquote social traffic to the Yale News website, primarily the science subreddit that drove a lot of traffic to our research stories, and LinkedIn. And then you can use your secondary dimension to take a look at the landing page for that. So you can see that Facebook sent, 14,000 sessions. I forget what time period this is, to the name change article from Yale Calhoun College changing its name to Grace Murray Hopper College. So this is a good way to see, okay, these are the networks that traffic is coming into my site from. These are the actual pages that are being shared on these individual networks. In the not too distant past, I will say, I've worked here since 2008. You used to have to ask a guy named Carmine to look at the data from a computer that sat under his desk for analytics to your website, and that only worked if you knew him and knew his direct number. But now we have Google Analytics, which has provided us like way too much data, right, to figure out what to do with. So a lot of what I do, even as in terms of the social media team, is taking a look at Google Analytics data and figuring out, okay, what traffic is coming in from social media, and what does that say, and what can we do with that information? So one of the things that is interesting from the Yale News perspective is that, primarily week over week, what gets shared is whatever the latest article is, right? So we have an article that was published today. That's probably what's getting shared on social media for the next few days. However, if you look at your analytics, you find that, like search, there are articles that have a much sort of longer shelf life and a longer tail in terms of like their social media engagement. So we'll see an article from 2005 about breast cancer research that continually gets shared on Facebook every few months. There's a huge spike in traffic to that particular article. And because of that, I can reach out to the communications officer in charge of that beat and say, like, we should think about like maybe, writing another story and updating that research. This is something that, is inherently doing well on social media because, someone is finding this content probably through search and then posting it to Facebook, where their network of friends or associates or connections is really interested in that and they're sharing it. So, that's something that doesn't happen. So that's a combination of like search traffic and social, right? Whereas, a typical search, is like someone gets that information, they might be done with it. With this type of content, where there's an emotional connection, where it has something to do with the way they identify, right? So there's somebody that shares, research information on social media, whether they have family, relatives, or friends or colleagues that are interested in that research for whatever reason. And then that spreads through their network. So taking a look at your analytics is a good way to get some insight into that. And one big takeaway from that trend-wise is make sure your news content can be shared easily on social media, right? Like your about page is probably less important. Your homepage, by default, might be, if you have a strictly informational site, the Yale.edu website, that homepage is, even though only 1% of traffic is social, the majority of that is to the homepage, even though it's just the homepage of the website. And again, it's probably, it's people that are not sharing like necessarily the content of that page, because if you look at the Yale.edu homepage, there's a feature package at the top, there's Yale News, there's an interactive piece that sort of takes you off to various parts of the university. So when you share that page, it's like less clear, like, okay, what did they find there that was engaging enough to share on social media? It's probably just that they're referencing the university. They want to, they're sharing that site as like an entity in a whole. But news content is definitely something that you want to make sure is shareable on social media for a number of reasons. That's the content that people will find compelling in the moment to share. It's a lot of where sort of like your typical sort of informational web content sort of gains a little more humanity a lot of times, more personality, talking about human beings, talking about current events. But also because, my team, we oversee the main Facebook page with over 1.3 million followers, the main Twitter account, et cetera. We want to be able to share that content as well and help amplify what you're doing. But a lot of times, websites that haven't been optimized to be shared on social media, like we can't share them without either having to do a lot of rework, or we just aren't able to share them for a number of reasons. So Facebook developed this thing called the Open Graph protocol that quote unquote enables any web page to become a rich object in a social graph, which is a fancy way of saying it's some metadata that you can put into your header along with some structured property information and object types that allows Facebook to read that information in. So when you share a link on Facebook, it shows like a picture and a headline and teaser text, right? But you have control over what Facebook shows there. So it can scrape an image off the page and it can scrape the title, title tag and things like that. But you can provide this information in your header to customize how that displays and make sure that it works well. And ogp.me is actually the shortened URL version of the Open Graph Protocol website where you can learn more about this. But this is what some of this looks like on Yale News, for instance. So OG stands for Open Graph here. Title is the title of the article, looking for fingerprints at the intersection of weather and climate. Description, the description content is what goes into that teaser text that you see under a Facebook title, like when you share a link, and then the image. And things that, so we haven't necessarily optimized this enough. I will say that description is too long, and Facebook, especially Twitter's version called Twitter Cards, will cut that off. The image is being pulled in dynamically from the top image in the page, but you can, we also have the ability in our system to override that with another image. So for instance, Facebook doesn't really like when you have images that have a lot of text in them. Sometimes on Yale News, we'll have an image that has a lot of text, but we'll put another image in Drupal that only gets pulled in through Facebook's preview function that pulls in another image that's customized for that. So the good news is there are, to do this in YaleSites is, fairly easy. I won't go into the types of modules that you need to use for that because I'm not an expert in that anymore, but I would talk to the ITS user experience group and digital strategy team about that and to figure out like the best way to get metadata into your header that you have control over. But if you go to developers.facebook.com/tools/debug, you have to be logged into Facebook, unfortunately, to use this, but it will show you how your web page will appear in Facebook when somebody shares a link to that page. So you put in the URL and it shows you what it's fetched from your site. So we have the image, we have the headline, we have that description. Actually, the description did fit in Facebook. It will not fit in Twitter, however. And it has the URL there. You can hit that button to scrape again if you've updated your page. So sometimes, if you've changed an image, if you've changed something in the headline, if you change the description, that gets cached in Facebook pretty quickly. So there's been times when we've changed a headline, so we have to go to this tool and hit scrape again for Facebook to go out, crawl that page, and pull in that information again so that it's up to date. Because otherwise, if people are sharing that link, they're going to be sharing sort of cached old information rather than the new stuff that's there. So this is a good way to check. It will also tell you if there's any errors in the Open Graph metadata on your page, if it's missing something, etc. I've seen some sites, on the web that are using templates of some sort, if they're using a WordPress or Drupal template or other template, where it kind of has sort of default Open Graph metadata baked into the header, and nobody ever sort of built that out or customized it. So it's still pulling in like maybe just like the logo of the website and the website title instead of on every page, instead of it being specific to the page. So if there is Open Graph data on that in the header, it's going to read that in over whatever else is on that page most of the time. So that's just something to be aware of, is that this debugger tool is a good way not only to sort of flush cache to make sure that Facebook has the most recent version of that page, but also to make sure that like it's actually pulling information that you want from that page. Twitter cards work pretty much the same way. So if you have Twitter cards set up for your website, you can attach photos, videos, media experiences to tweets. We have it set up on Yale News to pull in, again, the image, the headline, and the teaser right in that experience. So it's not just, a bit.ly link that doesn't have any kind of preview. It does have a preview, but you have to turn that on for your website and put a little extra metadata in there. So in our case, we just have to add Twitter card, summary large image. There's different kinds of cards. Summary large image is the one that we're using. And then we own the Yale Twitter account is associated on the back end, like through the Twitter developer website. You have to set up these cards in a Twitter account and associate that account with your website. So the Yale Twitter account is, Twitter knows that we're the same people, we're the official owners of that website, the Yale News website, and this Twitter account, and we can associate those things. A good thing in terms of other social media analytics you can get is then anytime someone shares your website on Twitter, your Twitter analytics for your Twitter account will reflect all of that web traffic, whether or not it came from your account. So you can see what's doing well on Twitter from your website through the Twitter card analytics data that's available to you in analytics.twitter.com. But basically, if you have to have a Twitter account set up in order to create the cards, in order to put this metadata on your page. There's other metadata that you can use to customize for Twitter, but Twitter will also read in the Open Graph data. So we've just chosen to use Open Graph to actually tag the image, the headline, and the description for this. You can get more customized if you want to, but Twitter will use those Open Graph things if you don't have anything set up from that. They have their own validator that you can put a URL in, see what the card's going to look like, and if there's any kind of errors in the log, that's at this URL. And again, you have to be logged in as Yale for that. And it says news.yale is whitelisted for summary large image card, which just means that we've again authenticated through Twitter, allowing that metadata to be read into Twitter and that they know that we own that. The other thing you need to think about in terms of social media and your website, because this is about interoperability and not just driving traffic to your website, but also figuring out how that interplay between, the open web and social media channels, happens, and how you can better sort of control the experience for your users. You want to be able to give your users an easy way to share content. I will say that, so we have these share buttons in the right rail on Yale News. Right now we have Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Reddit, and an email function that doesn't just open up your email application, but you can email it right through the browser. This is using AddThis, which is a third-party service. We are no longer going to be using this when we move to the new website. I'm not sure what we're going to be using. I think we're going to be using something called Add Anywhere. I'm not sure. Again, one thing to be aware of is, especially for YaleSites, these modules exist and you can put them in. Victor Velt in our office did a lot of customization to make these buttons appear and act a little differently. One thing to be aware of is anytime you're using third-party sharing buttons like this, it can put a lot of extra JavaScript overhead page load time, and sort of insidious web tracking features on your website that you probably don't actually want, which is why we're looking into a new tool for Yale News. Because, we don't want to add share buttons that slow down our page. We don't want to add share buttons that are like tracking our users across the entire internet for no good reason. But it gives people a way to say like, oh yeah, like I can share this right from here without just, most people know I can copy the URL and I can go into my app and I can, or I can go to Facebook online and share this that way. But doing it this way is sort of a shortcut. Making it easier for people to do that is important. And we're still debating what we're going to do with the email button. Right now, people emailing content is what I believe is used to be called dark social. It might still be called that. I don't know, which sounds more ominous than it is. But it's really just when you're sharing content with people, but we can't tell who's doing what because we're not collecting all this data about it because you're doing it through email. And we don't have a way to track that. And you'll see that, there's been various ways. And if you use this email button, we can actually see what's been emailed, but we can't see like how many people you emailed it to, but we can see like when traffic from your email comes back into the site. We don't really use that much. And I'm not a huge fan of, all that tracking. For my purposes, for analytics, all like what I said is I care about is knowing what's popular on our site, knowing what people are sharing, knowing what networks are contributing to that traffic, etc. You also want to feature social media content on your site where appropriate. So, there's not much social media traffic going into Yale.edu, but in the footer, there's this image that we update periodically from our Instagram stream, and it links to Instagram. Yale Instagram is the 9th most popular link on the Yale.edu website. Admissions is the first, but the fact that, this social media account is the 9th most popular thing on the institutional website was kind of surprising to us. But it shows that, people will engage with social media content that lives on your site and jump out from that web page to a social media app or website. From your site, we have a page, yale.edu/social-media, that is the Stay Connected to Yale University page that pulls in our Instagram feed here, and allows like a little bit of interactivity. If you hover over it, it will show you the caption. We have a tweet that's pulled in periodically as well. This is a heavier lift than it should be because of Instagram's changes to their API, but it is possible. And if you do have a lot of photos on your Instagram account and you want a way to feature those same photos on your website, you can either do it dynamically like this where it's pulling from Instagram, or you can just, that one in the footer we manually upload into Drupal. We don't pull that in dynamically. So, an easier way to do it is just to say like, okay, we're going to feature both of these photos on the website and on Instagram. Even if you have to do it manually on the website, you can link out to Instagram and sort of create that connection between those two things. Instagram, for those of you that don't use it a lot, doesn't allow you to actually like have links to websites. Instagram was probably the first sort of openly hostile social media platform to websites. It didn't have a presence on the web. It only existed in an app. Its app still doesn't link out to websites, except in the case of in your bio, or if you've paid for an Instagram ad through Facebook's ad platform, since Facebook bought them, then it allows people to click on your photos and take you to a website, but only if you pay money to do so. That is something else to keep in mind, that newer social media platforms are mobile first, app first, and not necessarily connected to the web in the way that we traditionally think of it. So Snapchat, other Instagram, still in some ways, it's not just like a web page that's somewhere else on the web that people interact with, like Facebook, right? I mean, as much as Facebook has split up its mobile app into like 15 different apps that you need on your phone now, if you want to message people or want to do something, the desktop experience is still like go to this URL and then experience it through this one sort of unified interface. Instagram has rolled out a website, so you can go to instagram.com/Yale. So if you're on a desktop thing, or you can link to an actual sort of web property of Instagram from there. So it's still participating in the web in that way, even though it's not sort of fully functional. So for us, for my team, we participate in Instagram because we have a lot of photos, we have a beautiful campus. It's also where a lot of students participate. So if we have a photo, even this photo of this person in the shadows, within 10 minutes, their friend will be like, hey, I saw this picture of you, and they'll tag them. We see a lot of interaction on our Instagram accounts of current students who are here tagging each other, identifying each other in photos. That's important engagement to us, but it doesn't necessarily lead to web traffic, which is another big component of our strategy for our office, which is why our focus on Facebook and Twitter is as heavy as it is. Make sure your site works flawlessly on mobile. I can't emphasize that enough. Mobile traffic continues to increase, but also think about when you're on your mobile device, if you have to wait 2 seconds for a website to load, you're kind of done. I mean, it's a break from the experience. And Google has rolled out AMP, Facebook has instant articles, Apple News will read it. You can pull in your content through Apple News and all these other sort of proprietary walled gardens. However, the best way to make sure that people can see what information you have for them on mobile is to make sure your site is responsive, fast, works flawlessly on mobile. The good news is that if you're on an ITS supported platform, part of the infrastructure, they're doing a fabulous job in terms of all of that, which is great to see. When I started in 2008, everybody was in Dreamweaver and static HTML, hand-coded everything, which in some ways allowed us to avoid a lot of InfoSec nightmares, I'm sure. But it also made, kind of more of a specialized skill to be able to update some of this content and to make sure that your website was optimized for newer upcoming technologies. Not that the new technologies are always better, RIP Meeting Maker, but we have to make sure that we actually, have content that operates on those platforms, right? Make sure your site is fast. That's the other one. I can't emphasize this enough. Even on desktop, things need to be fast. People want to get that information as fast as possible. So again, I would, if you're going to optimize, if you're going to err on the side of something, I would optimize for speed over social sharing buttons or lots of photos. If you can't get photos to load fast for whatever reason, if there's, if there's various things that are conflicting with the speed of your site, I would err on the side of the speed of your site, because that's the single most important thing for users in their experience, is not having to be waiting for pages to load, but also not having to download a ton of data if they're on their mobile plan, and using up that, especially since we have a large international audience. Our experience with the internet is better than some folks and worse than a lot of others in terms of web infrastructure. So making sure it's fast, making sure your pages aren't gigantic megabytes worth of data is also very important. And I can't overemphasize this enough. I know I'm the social media guy, but I'm a big believer in the open web. You own your website. Your website is your representation of yourself on the internet, and you control it. You can control that experience for your users, on behalf of your users, right? I can't overemphasize enough that the user experience is what you want to care about, and you want to be very mindful of your users and respecting them in every way possible, and that the more control you give over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., the less control you have over that user experience. So you want to make sure that you're using best practices to make that experience good for folks who are participating in the social media, interplay between open web and social media. You want to make sure your website works on social media platforms and there's nothing hindering it, and that images are being read in, right? And that your headline is correct and it's not just some default, just because it's the H1 on your page, it might not be the thing that you're trying to emphasize. And you know, because there's been such a shift in focus to social media, those platforms are all driven by you know, their own motives, which is predominantly to make money, and therefore you know, leads to some fragmentation. If you don't mind, for 1 second, I am going to just read from this one paragraph from a book that just came out on polity, Platform Capitalism by Nick Schiernick. In the end, the tendency of major platforms to grow to immense size thanks to network effects, combined with a tendency to converge toward a similar form as market pressures dictate, leads them to use enclosure as a key means of competition against their rivals. If this analysis is right, then capitalist competition is driving the internet to fragment. There is no necessity to this outcome, as political efforts can stall or reverse it, but within a capitalist mode of production, there are strong competitive pressures toward this end. Basically, what he's saying is that, and this isn't just in web platforms, but he's also talking about platforms in terms of industrialization platforms that GE is rolling out, Amazon's AWS, Amazon itself, Uber, etc. These platforms, because they're involved in capitalist competition, tend to cut each other off and enclose themselves from these other platforms, right? So right now, Facebook owns Instagram. You know, Snapchat avoided an acquisition by Facebook and now just rolled out their own public offerings, et cetera, et cetera. But those of us in the communications field get pulled in a lot of directions by all these things that aren't necessarily in our users' best interest, our own best interest, et cetera, et cetera. So this is just to point out that the open web continues to be still, you know, a large opportunity for us to really have an effect on what we are publishing and to get it out in ways that we can feel good about, that are respectful of our users, in ways that are ethical, tied to the core mission of our university, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just something I want to keep in mind, is that, you know, while this is focusing on social media, the real focus is on your website, is something that you own and control, and you know, figuring out how best to serve your users and better their experience is still where the majority of your focus is, and then figuring out how social media plays into that is you know, just one factor in that. All right. Questions?
So you said that at least Yale News is going from share this to this other.
AddThis, yeah.
Is that going to be true? Just Yale News?
So the current Yale News is in Drupal 6. AddThis was sort of the social module. When YaleSites moved to Drupal 7, I think ShareThis is now the default social module for that. So I can't speak to the larger sort of YaleSites offering, but I know that it already moved from AddThis. AddThis has also been, I think, one of the, you know, they've gotten criticized a lot for both overhead of like how much they're adding to sort of your page load times and collection of data. I don't know about ShareThis. This new one seems to be the that we're thinking about. Again, Victor Velt in our office, who's designing the site, it allows us the most customization. So I think once it's built, I would assume once it's built into our site that, you know, there'll be ways for others to reproduce that in their own site. But the ITS web team would be the ones to talk to about that specifically.
I also have a question about the sharing buttons. Sometimes we wonder if that they can lead to confusion about where your Facebook page or other social account is versus which button to click to actually share to one of those platforms. So I'm wondering if that's something that you thought about or looked into analytics.
Yes. I would suggest user testing for that. So in the new Yale News design, that was something that came up in some of our user testing, was that the placement of the buttons, it was like unclear, because there's sites where it's like, oh, I want to go to their Facebook page, and then you click on it and it's like to share to your Facebook page. So I would suggest doing some user testing for that to make sure that there's clarity around, okay, what is the the property, a link to a site versus like share. I think we're actually going to have language that says share by the buttons as was a decision that we made. But yeah, that's a good question, and we have considered that. But I think it might be, just because it's working on one site, it might be worth taking a look at with some user testing.
I'm sorry if you already covered this, just I got in a little late. Can you talk about whether and when and how and who it goes to if we ever want to boost our post with a paid, and oftentimes we're trying to drive traffic to a website or to a calendar or something, but can you talk a little bit about what that actually does and who sees it and whether that makes sense if we're looking particularly at a campus audience?
Sure. So we've been doing more paid posts from Facebook and Instagram, since they're both connected in the same ad platform, especially for campus communities, because we can target, people who follow us on Facebook who are currently on campus through their own self-reporting, through their Facebook profile or through Facebook's data about them. And it's a more effective way to reach that audience than to post it on our public page, which has 1 million followers, but Facebook only allows 10,000 of those followers to see it organically, and most of those are not going to be in the US, and hardly any of those are going to be on campus, right? So paid posts allow you to target more specifically, which can be effective. Facebook gives you a lot of data about people's behavior so it tells you basically you pay per successful click. So if your goal is to drive them to a website, then you pay per click to that website, if that's the goal that you're trying to drive. It's also given us a way to sort of advertise on Instagram or to link Instagram to a specific website. And it's pretty cost effective, and it's not, it's not super expensive. Like we'll spend $20 to promote something on Facebook and Instagram. Sure. So, we've helped OIA promote, Office of International Affairs, promote a scholarship they are offering to Middle Eastern students and North African students to come here to study in the summer. We were able to target, that demographic in those countries and found phenomenal engagement, tons of click-throughs that might have otherwise been lost sort of in the general audience of things. We've also, on a much smaller scale, for events around campus, a lot of times, an organization will create a Facebook event on their own thing, but we can actually anyone can pay to boost that actual event. So, OPAC can throw in $10 and target it to the main Yale page followers and push more people to your actual Facebook event. And again, especially if it's about getting people in seats for a specific event, paying just to be able to target it is good, because it allows you to really not worry about reaching a ton of people who aren't actually available to come to an event.
It's not printing a lot of posters anymore.
Right.
You might have a little money to throw at a couple of
Right.
those. But the targeting, is that something you guys can teach us? Because I'm afraid I'm going to target people who really can't or shouldn't come to some events.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we can work with, and we can also, it's something that we can partner with you, or we can also sort of show you how to do that on your own thing. I will say Facebook's ad platform is not the most, talking about user experience. Ugh. It's like a ton of work to post a Facebook tiny post, and that you're putting a small amount of money behind. But yeah, we're definitely going to, I think, both scale up our ability to partner with people, and then also do some trainings around those types of things.
Thanks.
Twitter just remains to be too expensive for our own purposes, just FYI.
Is anyone at the university, to your knowledge, using Snapchat in an official capacity?
Yes, the School of Management is using Snapchat. I also believe the library has an account, and
Student groups use it. They use particularly filters, so they may use it for an event.
right.
And you can buy a Snapchat filter that filters the event. So
But I know Amy Kundrat at the School of Management would be the person to talk to about their account.
Do you have any advice for processes to collect the content from around the challenge for us is just like, I know it's going on out there, but actually getting people to send me a photo or something to work with, and then knowing how to store it and schedule it. I don't have an effective process for that doesn't take up like an hour a day when it should take up 2 hours a week or something for our size.
Okay. So we have various workflows we've come up with in our office that are good for us, but I don't know how well they'd be applicable to other folks. We have everything from Google spreadsheets just that serve as like a very basic editorial calendar of a title and a date that something's going to be published. We also use so my team uses Asana, which is a project management tool. We're going to be moving towards a platform, I believe, soon that's going to allow us to do all of our sort of planning and publishing from the same platform. It's called Falcon, and it's going to pull in a lot of our social analytics for that. I would say that I think in terms of like collecting the actual content from folks, giving them like a very specific, very easy template to use. So saying like, I need a photo that needs to be at least this size. That's a big one because a lot of people, for whatever reason, I don't know if they're using Palm Pilots to take photos, but we get a lot of tiny photos still. So, I need a photo that's this size. You can set up a quick Google form for that, right? Like just like, title, description of event, a link, photo. You can also we've had a lot of luck with Box. So people, anyone at Yale has access to Box through their NetID login, but you can also set up a folder that collects content via email. So you can say like, if you send an email to this address, it will show up with a photo attachment. It'll show up in the Box folder that you own. You can't customize what that address is. So it's like 15 letters and numbers at box.com or whatever. But it's been good because people don't even have to log into Box. They don't have to know what it is. It's just like, send me an email with a photo as an attachment, but then it shows up in my folder where then I can work from my workflow from there. But I would just say like giving people one place to do that in an easy way that's not always just like for people that want to just be able to email a photo, that's great. A lot of people, it's like as soon as something moves out of email, they're actually like will use it because it's like not one more thing going on in their email. So if it's a quick web form, they can submit stuff. Just like making it as easy for them to submit as possible, but making sure there's some quality control around it on your end, so you're not like forced to, spend an hour then cleaning it up or doing other things with it. Sure. I think we have time for one more quick question or, okay.
I have a really quick question.
Sure.
Will any of the PowerPoints from the presentations today be available?
I believe so, yes. Yeah, I think they put all of them up. Well, thank you for coming and enjoy the rest of the day. And I just want to thank ITS for putting this event on and inviting me to speak. Thank you so much.